Irene Sukandar has just achieved a second GM norm during the Abu Dhabi Chess Festival. If you're wondering who that is and what a GM norm is, I'll take one quick minute to bring you up to speed before I dive into two of her games in this tournament. Irene Sukandar is a pioneer in women's chess and even chess in general at a high level in Indonesia. She was the first woman grandmaster in Indonesia, which she achieved at the age of 16. If you want to learn more about her, I highly recommend that you listen to the interview she did on the Chess Experience podcast hosted by Daniel Lona. She shares a lot about her chess journey, but more importantly, she emphasizes her dreams about driving chess forward as a whole in Indonesia for both women and men, which is refreshing to hear someone with so much influence have such a selfless perspective. If you're wondering what a GM norm is, it's basically a tournament performance with a super high score versus a strong field of opponents. If you want more specifics about the actual requirements, just go to the Wikipedia page and you'll find everything you need. Once a player has 3 GM norms and 2,500 FIDE rating points, they will become a grandmaster. So Irene is one step closer to being a grandmaster, and let's see how she did it. The first game that I want to show you is versus Robert Hovhannisyan. And this guy played board 4 and went 8 for 11 for Team Armenia in the open section of the Olympiad. 8 for 11 is a crazy performance, and he was playing against the best teams because Armenia finished second in the Olympiad. So quite the tall task for Irene, but let's see how she handled this 2600 Grandmaster. They go into an e4, e5 game, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on the Rui Lopez, so I'm going to kind of speed through the opening. But basically, it's kind of funny. They're just developing their pieces. But Irene actually even undevelops her knight just to put it on a different square. And eventually she prepares for a pawn break. And in this position, in a few moves, she prepares c5. What happens next is an explosion of hefty calculation. I can't even imagine how much effort it would take for a casual player like me to calculate these lines fully. But here it goes. B takes c5. Instead of taking back the c-pawn, E takes d4, and after pawn takes and pawn takes, white does not take the c-pawn because it's adequately defended. Obviously, like everything in black's position is kind of defending that pawn, so they push with the d-pawn to boot the knight. The knight goes forward, and if you count here, there's 2 attackers and 2 defenders, so everything looks great for black. But after bishop takes and pawn takes, the knight just moves backwards, and now there's 2 attackers again and only 1 defender. So what does Irene do? She finds knight forward, and after knight takes, bishop takes, knight takes, black's just down a pawn. But there's one move that does not result in a losing position. Bishop takes d5. Like, sacrificing this bishop 2 different ways. And it's tricky because even a 2600 grandmaster like Hovhannisyan finds the wrong move, queen takes. And this allows the rook to hit the queen with tempo, and the knight's hanging, so it's taken, and now it's even material, but it gets worse, because now Irene has control over the d-file, the rooks come off the board, and white's trying to push the e-pawn down the board, but it gets blockaded very easily, and yeah, now how are you going to defend this? You literally cannot. Now black has 2 connected passed pawns, which is just ultimately should be crushing. And this is how Irene converts. She tries to trade off the rooks. White opts for trading off this way. And now the b-pawn is running. Check is delivered. But honestly, the b-pawn keeps on running. Because what happens after queen takes, it's a simple fork of the bishop. And you're going to be up a piece. And it should be completely winning for black. So instead, for tactical reasons, the king gets out of the way. But now the queen comes forward. And again, you cannot take, because you are going to get forked this way, and also not good. So the queen comes this way, tries to take the a-pawn instead, but the b-pawn just keeps on running. After h4, queen takes f2, bishop d5, and in this position, Robert Hovhannisyan resigns because it gets really, really bad. Here, you can give another check with a queen, and then you simply promote. And it is completely crushing and going to be checkmate soon. It is a crazy game with Irene Sukandar finding the idea all the way back here to take on d5 with the bishop, sacrificing the piece and getting all the compensation, including material, but also the passed pawns. Just a completely fantastic performance by Irene, and she just dismantles this Olympiad silver medalist. The second game I want to share with you from this tournament is Irene versus Baadur Jobava. And yes, this is the Jobava who's literally got the Jobava London named after him, which is funny because he doesn't play the Jobava London. Instead, he goes for the Trompowsky. And Irene, even though this bishop's on g5 staring at the knight, she opts to kind of just ignore it. And we get into this position where it's kind of a stonewall structure. And the game goes on. So she breaks with the c pawn, and things get a little crazy. This is hitting the e3 pawn, so the queen just blocks. Very normal. But after a few more moves, right here, Jobava castles. And hint, I think Jobava thought that this fork on e5 was quite small, but Irene's like, no, this is a big issue. You need to be worried about it. And I guess Jobava, I don't understand what he didn't like about just h3, kicking the knight out, and then going from there. But, yeah, Jobava just sacrifices the knight, gives this check, and brings his knight forward. I think he just thought that there's plenty of comp for this whole kingside attack in exchange for the knight, but Irene knows better, and she just handles it like a champ. Kicks out the knight, and after all this goes on, she blockades the passed e-pawn so that there's no threats of promotion at this point. And yeah, from here, she moves around and just takes the pawn, and just watch what happens next. Because the queens get traded off the board, so what's the most valuable pieces now? It's the rook. And in this position, the rook's trapped. One move traps the rook. Knight f8, which I drew all these arrows already, but if you think about it, this is protected. This is getting hit. Bishop's protecting this square. Knight's covering this square. Knight's got this one, and then the pawns cover the rest. And then, of course, if you go here, the pawn's covering here. The rook has nowhere to go. So Irene just wins the rook, goes up the exchange and the piece that she won earlier with that giant fork. And from here, it's just clean conversion. She even sacrifices the exchange back. And from here, it's just clean technique, winning a pawn, and then just eliminating any sort of counterplay. All of her pawns are on dark squares. Her opponent's got a light square bishop, and this knight will eventually hop around and collect on these pawns. So Irene Sukandar takes down Baadur Jobava and has just an incredible performance overall. Irene Sukandar is rated 2373, but she still beat these two grandmasters and drew a few others and had a fantastic overall tournament performance. Congratulations again to her, and if you want to see more content like this, go and like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy learning, everyone.